I'm going to show you how to make a homemade pizza. There really is nothing easier, and it's a great project to get the family involved in. You'll need 2 cups of an all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of a good quality instant yeast, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and 3/4 of a cup of warm water. To start your pizza, you need to proof your yeast. Proofing yeast is putting your 2 tablespoons of sugar into the bowl, pouring in 2/3 of a cup of warm water, stirring it to dissolve the sugar, and now sprinkling your yeast over the top. We're going to leave this, and the process is called blooming, and we'll come back and look at this in about 5 minutes. It's been 5 minutes, and you can see that our yeast is starting to bloom, it's starting to foam. This is when you want to add the salt. If you add the salt too soon, salt will inhibit the growth of the yeast at this stage, so you want to add it just now. And you also want to add at this point your 2 tablespoons, I just eyeballed this, of olive oil. There's 1, there's 2. Mix it all together. And now we're ready to add the flour. I'm adding my 2 cups of all-purpose flour to my yeast mixture. I'm stirring it around. We still have about 1/3 of a cup of water left in our container, so now I'm going to add the remaining 2/3 of a cup of water. I'm continuing to stir, and we want to bring this into a soft, manageable dough, which will then turn out on a floured breadboard and knead for 4 minutes. I'm flouring my breadboard, and now I'm going to turn my rather sticky dough onto my breadboard. Using my scraper, I'm going to start turning it, forming it into a ball. The stickiness will go away the more you work with it. Now, just using my hands, I'm going to knead it for 4 minutes, give or take, until it feels smooth and elastic. You may need to add a little more flour here and there in this process, but this is always a fun process. So as I'm kneading this, I'll tell you a little bit about the history of pizza. It really wasn't eaten much in America until 1945, when our GIs came back from Italy, where it said that they had discovered the glorious joys of pizza, but legend has it that it probably really wasn't there. It doesn't matter. It came into popularity in America in the 1950s and has remained a staple of the American diet. It's a fun thing to make as a family project. It's easy. Almost everybody has the basic ingredients in their household at any one given time. And it's kind of just fun to play with this dough. You can see it's forming into a nice, round, smooth ball. And now it's time to wash out my mixing bowl, coat it with olive oil, and let this rise for an hour. Our beautiful dough has been rising for about an hour. It's a warm day here today, so we got a really fast rise on this. Isn't it beautiful? You can see that it's actually more than doubled. So what I want to do now is kind of punch it down, and I'm going to turn it out on a lightly floured breadboard. Lightly flour the top. It still has a little bit of stickiness to it. And start flipping it again. This is the time to talk to you about gluten. Gluten is something that just has such a terrible reputation these days, and nobody wants gluten products, and yet gluten is an essential part of wheat. What gluten actually is 2 proteins. They don't come together until you add water to wheat flour, but it's also what gives you your structure to your bread. It causes the gases to collect so that your yeast rises, and it gives structure and elasticity, and I can tell that this is a very happy, dough because it has a lot of stretch to it. That's the gluten. And I'm going to be able to really form and shape this into a beautiful 12-inch pizza. Now, if you're taking it out of your pan and you're not getting the flexibility with the dough, then you need to just rest your dough for about 5 to 10 minutes. That gives the gluten a chance to reform, and then you can probably stretch it and form it into your pan. So the next step is to put it in our pan. I'm going to use a 12-inch pizza pan. I'm putting just a little bit of cornmeal on this pan. And now comes the task of transferring the pizza dough onto the pan. So I've transferred the dough onto my pan, and now I'm just kind of pressing it around into the pan. It has a lot of elasticity, so it's going to be a really easy dough to work with. Kind of bringing it up into the corners. I have some thin spots here, so what I'm going to do is just take a big chunk of dough that I have right here, and I'm just going to patch. Nobody's going to see it. It's all going to come together in the end. And you just kind of want to go around the edge, pressing your dough into and up against the rim of the pan, all the way around the pan. Flour your fingers if you need to. And we're ready, almost ready, to top it. As I'm forming my pizza, I realized that I had just a little bit too much dough. It was getting kind of thick in spots, and unless you like a really thick crusted pizza, you might want to just grab a hunk of the dough out and just pull it off, and then just kind of just keep working around until you're happy. You're going to have some thin spots here, so sort of bring some dough down into those spots, but get a nice edge going. Once you've got your edge going, I like to go through it with my fingers just to kind of make some dimples into the dough. And now we're ready to build our pizza. Step number one is you want to just spread some good quality Italian sauce on your pizza. I do not make my own sauce. I find there are just too many good sauces available pre-made, and you can kind of choose your flavor that you want. This is from Trader Joe's. It's a 3-cheese sauce that I'm particularly fond of. It's a good all-purpose Italian sauce. Be generous, bring it right up to the edge, but remember, you don't want it up over the crust. The next thing, and just use the back of your spoon to spread it around. Next, it's time for just a thin layer of cheese. I'm using a rustic cut mozzarella, low moisture, available in any grocery store. And now we're going to add our pepperoni. Pepperonis are going to shrink when they're in the oven, so you want to place them really close together, because when they come out, they're going to it's not going to look like it's quite as covered as it is when it goes in. 2 years ago, we had our whole family out for a summer vacation, and one of the projects that we did with all the grandchildren is I had my 5 grandchildren around a kitchen table counter, and we made pizzas one night for dinner, and it was the biggest mess I've ever experienced. But at the end of the day, we had 5 really beautiful, very tasty, very different pizzas. Everybody put their own toppings on it and made it just the way they wanted, and it was really so much fun. So pizza is something that anybody can make, and everybody should know how to make. It's just something that we think we have to call out for, and we really don't. So now I'm completely covered in pepperoni, and that's a whole lot more pepperoni than you'll ever get from a commercial pizza. More of your rustic cut mozzarella cheese over the top. And proportions aren't important, just whatever looks right to you. Be generous. Use your hands to kind of spread it around. And just because I walked over to the herb garden today and got some fresh herbs, I'm going to add just a little bit of fresh oregano to this, which will give it a wonderful aroma when it's cooking, a little bit of color to the top. And voila, it's ready for the oven. Our pizza's in a preheated 450 degree oven. It'll cook for about 12 to 15 minutes.